Hey guys, it's reading day, and I'm going to be reading from the Book of Werewolves, a book written in the 1800s. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everybody, happy Sunday. Hang on one second here. Hey everybody, happy Sunday. It's fun to be here. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you have a paranormal need, we can help you. It might take us a couple days to get to you because California is a really huge state, but we will definitely get to you. Today we're broadcasting via Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok. So hello, TikTok. So hopefully we get some, it's looking slow on TikTok. Well, it's Father's Day, right? It's Father's Day. Again, my name is Charlotte. If you're watching from Facebook, and a lot of you are, please feel free to hit that follow button. We're always trying to find followers. And please feel free to comment. You know, if you get my chat room to comment. Same thing with YouTube. We have over 1,000 videos over at YouTube. They're all this show. Well, not this show, but they're all versions of this show, right? I don't like to do the same types of shows every day. We broadcast Sunday through Friday. And each show is different. We might have a show on, we got the show on the opioid epidemic coming up on Thursday. That's how I like to vary it. I'm a journalist, photojournalist is my real job. So I like to vary these shows. But on the norm, you're going to get paranormal shows, including ghosts, UFOs, werewolves, you name it, we do it. And that is 6:30 p.m. Pacific every day, youtube.com/@California Haunts Radio. I see you guys coming up in TikTok. I appreciate it. Can't see it because it's on my phone, but I do see you guys coming up. I do have a goal of 100 Nights Helms today, and just like at the bottom, I have my ticker going for donations for California Haunts Radio to keep us on the air. This is what I do, and this is how I pay the bills. So if you guys could help me out with the donation, that would be great. I really appreciate it. I do have Venmo and PayPal. It's not required, though. I'm just here to have a great time with you guys. It's Sunday, and this is the day everybody's winding down from their weekends. And, you know, they put their slippers on, sit in front of the fire. Some of you, maybe it's tomorrow, depending where you are in the world. I sit in front of the fire, have some wine, have some hot cocoa, and listen to ghost stories. And for the most part, every Sunday I read from a true ghost story. Not all the time, but most of the time. Just like this week, I'm reading from the Book of Werewolves, which was written by Baring-Gould, who happened to be a priest back in the 1800s, and he wrote this book. The funny thing about this, if anybody has ever watched Little House on the Prairie, I happened to see this book featured. Miss Beadle showed her students this book. And I thought, well, that's funny. I wonder if it's a prop or whether it's a legitimate book. And it turns out it's a real book. So we've been reading from this. This is day 5 of reading from this Book of Werewolves. And this priest is really, Anglican priest. This priest has really gone to above and beyond to get his research. But remember, these books that I'm reading are from the Project Gutenberg, and those books are completely out of copyright. So the newest book I would be reading would be dated 1944. This one is dated 1805. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be, that's come out over the past few years that's a little different, right? So just keep that in mind. We're reading stuff from the 1800s, early 1900s. Some of this is 1600s. They've just been transcribed out into Project Gutenberg. So bear that in mind. But I will be reading for about an hour, and it's been an interesting book so far. We've gone to Scandinavia and learned about werewolf legends there, and England and Germany, and it's been an interesting read. And so today, we're going to be talking about the mythological werewolf to start off. So hopefully, I'll be able to read this stuff. Hopefully it's not in some weird language. So far, I've run into Scandinavian, I've run into Norwegian, I've run into German, I've run into quite a few. And the only thing I know how to read is Spanish. So that gives you an idea how it's been. Okay, there will be times when I slow down because I'm trying to be careful about what's written, what is written in here, because now we use the word unalive, this and that, to keep from getting in trouble with the internet police. So please don't turn me into the internet police. I'm doing my best to get through this stuff. It's just it's written in old school, so I'm just trying to figure it all out. Again, for you guys over on TikTok, we do have a show Sunday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. It's youtube.com/@CaliforniaHauntsRadio. And we talk about all kinds of paranormal things. So if you're into the paranormal, this is the place to be. This is the place to be Sunday through Friday. I can guarantee it. Okay? All right. Again, I'm going for 1,000 likes. So if you guys over at TikTok can double tap that screen for me, help me reach my goal of 1,000 likes. I would really appreciate it. That's something else. And again, you're not required to send me any gifts or anything like that, but I would appreciate it if you did. It would be great. Okay, let's get on with this without further ado. And we are at chapter, and I don't read Roman numeral, so let me move this over. I do not read Roman numerals, so it's chapter X, whatever that is, chapter 10, right? Is that what it is? And so I'll be reading for about an hour, like I said, and I hope you enjoyed the book. I mean, so far it's been a very educational book. I mean, we're learning about werewolves, but we're also learning about other stuff as well. So it's been very, very educational. Okay, and for you guys over on Facebook and everywhere else, and TikTok too, some people don't sit in front of the fire and listen to me. Some people do their laundry and carry me around the house in their pocket as I'm reading, or as they're doing, their Sunday laundry and mopping up and all that stuff. So, okay, here we go. So, mythological origin of the werewolf myth. So here we go. I'm going to try and get to where it starts. I learned very soon, too, on this book, that just below where the chapters started has a big thing of what exactly is in the chapters. And I started to read through that, and it got like, ugh. So I figured it out. Okay, so here we go. Transformation into beasts forms an integral portion of all mythological systems. The gods of Greece were wont to change themselves into animals in order to carry out their designs with greater speed, security, and secrecy, though in human forms. In Scandinavian mythology, Odin changed himself into the shape of an eagle, Loki into that of a salmon. Eastern religions abound in stories of transformation. The line of demarcation between this and the transition of a beast's soul into man, or a man's soul into a beast, metamorphosis. Oh, yeah, is very narrow. The doctrine of metempsychosis is founded on the consciousness of gradation between beasts and men. The belief in a soul-endowed animal world was present among ancients, and the laws of intelligence and instinct were misconstrued or were regarded as a puzzle which no man might solve. Checking my time. I started? Okay. The human soul, with its consciousness, seemed to be something already perfected in a pre-existing state. And, in the myth of metempsychosis, we trace the yearnings and gropings of the soul after the source whence its own consciousness was derived. Counting its dreams and hallucinations as gleams of memory, recording acts which had taken place in a former state of existence. Modern psychology has resumed the same thread of conjecture and thinks to see in man the perfected development of lower organisms. After death, the translation of the soul was supposed to continue. It became either absorbed into the news, into Brahma, into the deity, or it sank in the scale of creation and was degraded to animate a brute. Okay. Thus, the doctrine of metempsychosis was emphatically one of the rewards and punishments for the condition of the soul after death depended on its training during life. A savage and bloodthirsty man was exiled, as in the case of Lycaon, into the body of a wild beast. The soul of timorous man entered a hare, and drunkards or gluttons became swine. The intelligence which was manifest in the beast bore such a close resemblance to that of a man in the childhood and youth of the world that it is not to be wondered at if our forefathers failed to detect the line of demarcation drawn between instinct and reason. And failing to distinguish this, they naturally fell into the belief in metempsychosis. Metem with an M, psychosis. It was not merely a fancy's external resemblance between the beast and man, but it was the perception of skill, pursuits, desires, sufferings, and griefs, like his own, in the animal creation, which led man to detect within the beast something analogous to the soul within himself, and this, notwithstanding the points of contrast existing between them, elicited in his mind so strong a sympathy that, without a great stretch of imagination, he invested the beast with his own attributes, and with the full powers of his own understanding. He regarded it as actuated by the same motives, as subject to the same laws of honor, as moved by the same prejudices, and the higher the beast was in the scale, the more he regarded it as an equal. A singular illustration of this will be found in the Finnegan saga. Now, we must relate about Finnbog. It was written differently up there. Afterward, in the evening, when men slept, he rose, took his weapons, and went forth, following the tracks which led to a dairy farm. As was his wont, he stepped out briskly among the spoor till he came to the dairy. There he found the bear lying down, and he had slain the sheep, and he was lying on them, lapping their blood. Then, said Finnbog, stand up, Brain, make ready against me. That becomes you more than crouching over those sheep's carcasses. The bear sat up, looked at him, and lay down again. Finnbog said, if you think that I'm too fully armed to match with you, I will do this. And he took off his helmet and laid it aside and laid aside his shield. Then he said, stand up now if you dare. The bear sat up, shook his head, and then cast himself down again. Finnbog exclaimed, I see, you want us both to be born alike. So he flung aside his sword and said, be it as you will. Now stand up if you have the heart that I believe you have, rather than one such as was possessed by these rent sheep. Then Brain stood up, then Bruin. See, it said Brain before, now it's Bruin. Then Bruin stood up and prepared to fight. The following story, taken from the mouth of an Osage Indian by J. A. Jones and published in his Traditions of North American Indians, shows how thoroughly the savage mind misses a line of demarcation between instinct and reason, and how the man of the woods looks upon beasts as standing on an equality with himself. An Osage warrior is in search of a wife. He admires the tidy and shrewd habits of the beaver. He accordingly goes to a beaver hut to obtain one of that race for a bride. In one corner of the room sat a beaver woman combing the heads of some little beavers, whose ears she boxed very soundly when they would not lie still. The warrior, i.e. the beaver chief, whispered the Osage that she was his second wife, and was very apt to be cross when there was work to be done, which prevented her from going to see her neighbors. Those whose heads she was combing were her children, he said, and she who had made them rub their noses against each other and be friends was his eldest daughter. Then, calling aloud, wife, he said, what have you to eat? The stranger is undoubtedly hungry. See, he is pale, his eye has no fire, and his step is like that of a moose. Without replying to him, for it was a sulky day with her, she called aloud, and a dirty-looking beaver entered. Go, said she, and fetch the stranger something to eat. With that, the beaver girl passed through a small door into another room, from which she soon returned, bringing some large pieces of willow bark, which she had laid at the feet of the warrior as his guest. While the warrior beaver was chewing the willow, and the Osage was pretending to do so, they fell to talking over many matters, particularly the wars of the beavers with the otters and their frequent victories over them. He told our father by what means the beavers fell large trees and moved them to the places where they wished to make dams, how they raised to any requisition the pools for their lodges, and how they plastered them so as to keep out rain. Then he spoke of their employments when they had buried the hatchet, of the peace and happiness and tranquillity they enjoyed when gathered into companies. They rested from their labors and passed their time in talking and feasting, and bathing, and playing the game of bones and making love. All the while the young beaver maiden sat, with her eyes fixed upon the Osage, at every pause moving a little nearer, till at length she was at his side, with her forepaw upon his arm. A minute more, and she had placed it around his neck, and was rubbing her soft furry cheek against his. Our ancestor, on his part, betrayed no disinclination to receive her caresses, but returned them with equal ardor. The old beaver, seeing what was going on, turned his back upon them, and suffered them to be as kind to each other as they pleased. At last, turning quickly around, while the maiden, suspecting what was coming, and pretending to be abashed, ran behind her mother, he said, to end this foolery, what say you to marrying my daughter? She is well brought up, and is the most industrious girl in the village. She will flat more wall with her tail in a day than any maiden in the nation. She will gnaw down a larger tree betwixt the rising of the sun and the coming of the shadows than many a smart beaver of the other sex. As for her wit, try her at the game of dish, and see who gets it master. And for cleanliness, look at her. Petticoat? Our father answered that he did not doubt that she was industrious and cleanly able to gnaw down a very large tree, and to use her tail to very good purpose, that he loved her much, and wished to make her the mother of his children, and thereupon the bargain was concluded. These two stories, the one taken from the Icelandic saga, and the other from the American Indian tradition, shew clearly the oneness which the uncultivated mind believes to exist between the soul of man and the soul of a beast. The same sentiments actuate both man and brute, and if their actions are unlike, it is because of the differences in their formation. The soul within is identical, but the external accidents of body are unlike. Among many rude as well as cultivated people, the body is regarded as a mere garment wrapped around the soul. The Buddhist looks upon identity as existing in the soul alone, and the body as no more constituting identity than the clothes he puts on or takes off. He exists as a spirit. For convenience, he vests himself in a body. Sometimes that body is human, sometimes it is bestial. As his soul rises in the spiritual scale, the nobler is the animal form which it tenants. Buddha himself passed through various stages of existence. In one he was a hare, and his soul being noble, led him to emulate himself, in order that he might offer hospitality to Indra, who, in the form of an old man, craved of him food and shelter. The Buddhist regards animals with reverence. An ancestor may be tenanting the body of the ox he is driving, or a descendant may be running at his side barking and wagging his tail. When he falls into an ecstasy, his soul is leaving his body for a little while. It is laying aside its raiment of flesh and blood and bone, to return to its once more when the trance is over. But this idea is not confined to Buddhists. It is common everywhere. The spirit or soul is supposed to be imprisoned in the body. The body is but the lantern through which the spirit shines. The corruptible body is believed to press down the soul, and the soul is unable to attain to perfect happiness till it has shuffled off to its earthly coil. Butler regards the members of the body as so many instruments used by the soul for the purpose of seeing, hearing, feeling, etc., just as we use telescopes or crutches, and which may be rejected without injury or anything else to our individuality. The late Mr. J. Holloway of the Bank of England, brother to the engraver of that name, related of himself that, being one night in bed and unable to sleep, he had fixed his eyes and thoughts with uncommon intensity on a beautiful star that was shining in at the window, when he suddenly found his spirit released from his body and soaring into space, but instantly seized with anxiety for the anguish of his wife if she discovered his body apparently dead beside her. He returned and re-entered it with difficulty. He described that returning as returning from light into darkness, and that whilst the spirit was free, he was alternately in the light or the dark, accordingly as his thoughts were with his wife or with the star. Popular mythology in most lands regards the soul as oppressed by the body, and its liberation is considered a deliverance from the burden of the flesh. Whether the soul is at all able to act or express itself without a body, any more than a fire is able to make cloth without the apparatus of boiler and machinery, is a question which has not commended itself to the popular mind. But it may be remarked that the Christian religion alone is that which raises the body to a dignity equal to that of the soul, and gives it a hope of ennoblement and resurrection never dreamed of in any other mythological system. But the popular creed, in spite of the most emphatic testimony of Scripture, is that the soul is in bondage so long as it is united to a body, a creed entirely in accordance with that of Buddhism. These are not my views. This is the views of the writer and the research that he's done. So please bear with me on this. Okay? Remember, 1800s, guys. If you like what you see, double tap that screen, TikTok. Double tap that screen. Looking for some likes. Looking for some night helms. That would be really cool and nice of you. If the body be the cage, as a poet of our own has been pleased to call it, in which dwells the imprisoned soul, it is quite possible for the soul to change its cage. If the body be but a vesture clothing of the soul, as the Buddhist asserts, it is not improbable that it may occasionally change its vesture. Okay. This is self-evident, and thus has arisen the countless tales of transformation and transmigration which are found all over the world. That the same view of the body as a mere clothing of the soul was taken by our Teutonic and Scandinavian ancestors is evident even from the etymology of the words like them. There's another word I'm not going to even try, used to express the soulless body. I have already spoken of the Norse word hammer. I wish now to make some further remarks upon it. Hammer is represented in Anglo-Saxon by Hama, Homa, in Saxon by Hamel. In Old High German, here we go. In Old High German by Hamel, in Old French by Homa, Homa Hama, to which are related the Gothic Gahaman, Ufarhaman, Anahaman. I'm trying, you guys. Greek, I'm not even going to go there. Okay, we're just going to, okay. That's also the Old High German Hemidi and the modern Hemdi garment. In composition, we find this word as Ik Hagner in Old Norse, in Old High German Likhamo, Anglo-Saxon Likhama, and another one, and Fleischhammer. I probably blew that completely. Old Saxon Likhamo, modern German Lichnam. A body, i.e. a garment of flesh, precisely as the bodies of birds are called in Old Norse, Fjordhammer. In, oh my God, it goes on. Anglo-Saxon Federholma, in Old Saxon Featherhammer, or feather dresses in the bodies of wolves are called in Old Norse Ulfhammer, and seals' bodies in Feroci. I'm not going there. Nope, we're done with that. The significance of the old verb Iohamas is now evident in its migrate from one body to another, and hamaskipti is the I apologize to anybody that understands these languages. It's a transmigration of the soul. The method of this transmigration consisted in simply investing the body with the skin of the animal into which the soul was to migrate. When Loki, the northern god of evil, went in quest of the stolen Idun, he borrowed Freyja her falcon dress, and at once became, to all intents and purposes, a falcon. Thiassi pursued him as he left Thrymir, having first taken upon him an eagle's dress and thereby become an eagle. In order to seek Thor's lost hammer, Loki borrowed again of the Freyja her feather dress, and as he flew away in it, the feathers sounded as they winnowed the breeze. In like manner, Caedmon speaks of an evil spirit flying away in a feather dress. I'm not going to go there. Okay, so it says, and of an angel. I'm just trying to get through this. There's something here that's foreign. I can't read it. The very expression made use of when speaking of a bird. Sorry, guys, I can't read any of that. The soul, in certain cases, is able to free itself from the body and to enter that of the beast or man. In this form stood the myth in various theological systems. Among the Finns and Lapps, it is not uncommon for a magician to fall into a cataleptic condition, and during the period his soul is believed to travel very frequently in bodily form, having assumed that any animal most suitable for his purpose. I have given instances in a former chapter. The same doctrine is evident in most cases of lycanthropy. The patient is in a state of trance, his body is watched, and it remains motionless, but his soul has migrated into the carcass of a wolf, which it vivifies, and in which it runs its course. A curious backstory shows that among the strange Turanian people, cut off by such a flood of Aryan nations from any other members of his family, the same superstition remains. A huntsman was once engaged in the chase of a bear on Pyrenean peaks, when the Bruin turned suddenly on him and hugged him to death, but not before he had dealt the brute its mortal wound. As the huntsman expired, he breathed his soul into the body of the bear, and thenceforward ranged the mountains as a beast. One of the tales, the Sanskrit book of the fables, the Panchatantra, don't hold me on that one, affords such remarkable testimony to the Indian belief in metempsychosis that I am tempted to give it in abstract. A king was one day passing through the marketplace of his city when he observed a hunchback Merry Andrew, whose contortions and jokes kept the bystanders in a roar of laughter. Amused with the fellow, the king brought him to his palace. Shortly after, in the hearing of the clown, a necromancer taught the monarch the art of sending his soul into a body not his own. Some little while after this, the monarch anxiously put in practice his newly acquired knowledge, rode into the forest accompanied by his fool, who, he believed, had not heard, or at all events comprehended, the lesson. They came upon the body of a Brahmin lying in the depths of the jungle, where he had died of thirst. The king, leaving his horse, performed the requisite ceremony, and instantly his soul had migrated into the body of the Brahmin, and his own lay dead upon the ground. At the same moment, however, the hunchback deserted his body and possessed himself of that which had been the king's. Smart guy, right? And showing farewell to the dismayed monarch, he rode back to the palace, where he was received with royal honors. But it was not long before the queen and one of the ministers discovered that a screw was somewhere loose. That's pretty funny. And when the quondam king, but now Rodiman, arrived and told his tale, a plot was laid for the recovery of his body. The screw was loose. The queen asked her false husband whether it were possible to make her parrot talk. And he, in a moment of uxorious weakness, promised to make it speak. He laid his body aside and sent his soul into the parrot. Immediately, the true king jumped out of his Brahmin body and resumed that which was legitimately his own, and then proceeded with the queen to wring the neck of the parrot. But besides the doctrine of metempsychosis, which proves such a fertile mother of fable, there was another article of popular mythology which gave rise to stories of transformation. Among the abundant superstitions existing relative to transformation, 3 shapes seem to have been preeminently affected: that of the swan, that of the wolf, and that of the serpent. In many of the stories of those transformed, it is evident that the individual who changes shape is regarded with superstitious reverence, as a being of higher order, and of a divine nature. In Christian countries, everything related to heathen mythology was regarded with a suspicious eye by the clergy, and any miraculous powers not sanctioned by the church were attributed to the evil one. The heathen gods became devils, and the marvels related to them were supposed to be effected by diabolical agency. A case of transformation which had shown the power of an ancient god was in Christian times considered as an instance of witchcraft. Thus, stories of transformation fell into bad odor, and those who changed shapes were no longer regarded as heavenly beings, commanding reverence, but as miserable witches deserving the stake. In the infancy of the world, when natural phenomena were ill understood, expressions which to us are poetical were of real significance. When we speak of thunder rolling, we use an expression which conveys no further idea than a certain likeness observed between the detonations and the roll of a vehicle. But, to the uninstructed mind, it was more. The primeval savage knew not what caused the thunder, and tracing the resemblance between it and the sound of wheels, he had once concluded that the chariot of the gods was going abroad. That sounds cool. Or that the celestial spirits were enjoying a game of bowls. Now, when I was growing up, my sister always told me during thunderstorms that the leprechauns were bowling. So, yeah. So that's what I was told as a kid. So I always thought they were bowling. We speak of fleecy clouds because they appear to us soft and light as wool. But the first men tracing the same resemblance believed the light vapors to be flocks of heavenly sheep. Or, we say that the clouds are flying. The savage used the same expression as he looked up at the mackerel sky and saw in it flights of swans coursing over the heavenly lake. Once more, we creep nearer to the winter fire, shivering at the wind, which we remark as howling around the house, and yet we do not suppose that the wind has a voice. The wild primeval men thought that it had, and because dogs and wolves howl, and the wind howled, and because they had seen dogs and wolves, they concluded that the storm wind was a night hound, or a monstrous wolf racing over the country in the darkness of the winter night, ravening for prey. Although, with the rise of the system of explaining the operations of nature by analogies in the bestial world, another conclusion forced itself on the untaught mind. The flocks, which strayed into heaven, were no eternity sheep, but were the property of the spiritual beings, and were themselves perhaps spiritual. The swans which flew aloft, far above the topmost peak of the Himalaya, were no ordinary swans, but were divine and heavenly. The wolf which howled so wildly in the long winter night, the hounds whose bay sounded so dismally through the shaking black forest, were no mundane wolves and hounds, but issued from the home of a divine hunter, and were themselves wondrous, supernatural beings of godlike race. And so, the clouds having become swans, the swan clouds were next believed to be divine beings, Valkyries, Asperas, and the like, seen by mortals in their feathered dresses, but appearing among the gods as damsels. The storm wind having been supposed to be a wolf, next, was taken to be a tempestuous god, who delighted to hunt on earth in lupine form. How many times have we all laid down on the grass and looked up at the clouds and envisioned different shapes? Right? That's what they were doing. We have a quick sip of water, guys. Speaking of hot, I have mentioned also the serpent shape as being one very favorite in mythology. The ancient people saw the forked and writhing lightning and supposed it to be a heavenly fiery serpent, a serpent which had godlike powers, which was in fact a divine being, manifesting himself to mortals under that form. Among the North American Indians, the lightning is still regarded as the great serpent, and the thunder is supposed to be his hissing. Ah! Exclaimed a Magdeburg peasant, see I'm trying, to a German professor, during a thunderstorm, as a vivid forked gleam shot to earth. What a glorious snake was that! And this resemblance did not escape the Greeks. Okay, move on. It is so difficult for us to unlearn all we know of the nature of meteorological phenomena. So hard for us to look upon atmospheric changes, as though we know nothing of the laws that govern them, that we are disposed to treat such explanations as popular myths, as I have given above, as fantastic and improbable. But among the ancients, all solutions of natural problems were tentative. It is only after the failure of every attempt made to explain these phenomena on supernatural grounds that we have been driven to the discovery of the true interpretation. Yet, among the vulgar, a vast amount of mythology remains, and is used still to explain atmospheric mysteries. The other day, a Yorkshire girl, when asked why she was not afraid of thunder, replied because it was only her father's voice. What knew she of the rushing together with the air to fill the vacuum caused by the transit of the electric fluid? To her, the thunderclap was the utterance of the Almighty still in North Germany. Does the peasant say of thunder that the angels are playing skittles aloft, and of the snow that they are shaking up the feather beds in heaven? The myth of the dragon is one which admits, perhaps, more than any other, of the identification with the meteorological phenomena, and presents to us as well the phase of transition from theorem portfolio, okay, THERIOMOR, phase SAS, and anthropomorphosis. That one I know, anthropomorphosis. The other one I don't know. The dragon in popular mythology is nothing else than the thunderstorm, rising at the horizon, rushing with expanded, winnowing black pinions across the sky, darting out its forked fiery tongue and belching fire. In a Slovakian legend, the dragon sleeps in a mountain cave through the winter months, but at the equinox burst forth. In a moment the heaven was darkened, and became black as pitch, only illumined by the fire which was flashed from the dragon's jaws and eyes. The earth shuddered. The stones rattled down the mountainsides into glens. Right and left and right, did the dragon lash its tail, overthrowing pines and beeches, snapping them as rods. He evacuated such floods of water that the mountain torrents were full. But after a while his power was exhausted. He lashed no more with his tail, ejected no more water, and spat no more fire. I think it's impossible not to see in this description a springtide thunderstorm, but to make it more evident that the untaught mind did regard such a storm as a dragon, I think the following quotation from John of Brompton's Chronicle will convince the most skeptical. Quote, Another remarkable thing is this, that took place during a certain month in the Gulf of Satalia, it's on the coast of Pamphylia. There appeared a great and black dragon which came in clouds and let down his head into the water, whilst his tail seemed turned to the sky. And the dragon drew the water to him by drinking, with such avidity, that in any ship, if any ship, even though laden with men and other heavy articles, had been near him when drinking, it would nevertheless have been sucked up and carried on high. In order, however, to avoid this danger, it is necessary, when people see it, at once to make a great uproar, and to shout and hammer tables, so that the dragon, hearing the noise and the voices of those shouting, may withdraw himself far off. Some people, however, assert that this is not a dragon, but the sun drying up the waters of the sea, which seems more probable. Such is John of Brompton's account of a water spout. In Greek mythology, the dragon of the storm has begun to undergo anthropomorphosis. Typhoeus, the son of Tartarus, and Terra, the storm rising from the horizon may well be supposed to issue from the earth's womb, and its characteristics are sufficient to decide its paternity. Typhoeus, the whirlwind or typhoon, has 100 dragon or serpent heads, the long writhing strive of vapor which run before the hurricane cloud. He belches fire, that is, lightnings, issued from the clouds, and his roaring is like the howling of wild dogs. Typhoeus ascends to heaven to make war on the gods, who fly from him in various fantastic shapes, who cannot see, in this ascent, the hurricane climbing up the vault of sky, and in the flying gods the many fleeting fragments of white cloud, which are seen drifting across the heavens before the gale. Typhoeus, according to Hesiod, is the father of all bad winds, which destroy with rain and tempest, all in fact which went among the Greeks by the name of Lelaps. I hope it's true. Bringing injury to the agriculturalist and peril to the voyager. Alright, this is all written in Greek. We're not going to deal with that, so we skip that one. In both modern Greek and Lithuanian household mythology, the dragon or drake has become an ogre, a gigantic man with few of the dragantine attributes remaining. Von Hahn, in his book, I can't even pronounce it, tells many tales of drakes, and in all, the old characteristics have been lost. And the drake is simply a gigantic man with magical and superhuman powers. It is the same among the Lithuanian peasantry. A dragon walks on 2 legs, talks, flirts with a lady, and marries her. He retains his evil disposition, but has slewed off his scales and wings. Such is the change which has taken place in the popular conception of the dragon, which is an impersonification of the thunderstorm. A similar change has taken place in the Swan Maiden and werewolf myths. In ancient Indian Vedic mythology, the Asperas were heavenly damsels, who dwelt in the tether between earth and sun. Their name, which signifies the shapeless, or those who go in the water. It is uncertain which is the correct derivation. It's a correct derivation. It's expressive of the white cirrus constantly changing form, and apparently floating swan-like on the blue-like heaven sea. These Apsaras, according to the Vedic creed, were fond of changing their shapes, appearing generally as ducks or swans, occasionally as human beings. The souls of heroes were given to them for lovers and husbands. One of the most graceful of the early Indian myths is the story of Asperas, Urvashi. Urvashi loved Purvaeus, I hate this, and became his wife, on the condition that she was never to behold him in a state of nudity. They remained together for years, till the heavenly companions of Urvashi determined to secure her return to them. They accordingly beguiled Purvaeus into leaving his bed in the darkness of night, and then, with a lightning flash, they disclosed him in his nudity to his wife, who was thereupon constrained to leave him. He pursued her, full of sorrow at his loss, and found her at length swimming in a large lotus pond in swan shape. that this story is not a mere invention, but rests on some mythological explanation of natural phenomena, I think more than probable, as it is found all over the world with a few variations. As every Aryan branch remains the story, or traces of it, there can be no doubt that the belief in swan maidens who swam in the heavenly sea, and who sometimes became the wives of those fortunate men who managed to steal from their feather dresses, formed an integral portion of the old mythological system of the Aryan family before it was broken up into Indian, Persian, Greek, Latin, Russian, Scandinavian, Teutonic, and other races. But more as the same myth is found in tribes not Aryan, and far removed from contact with European or Indian superstition, as, for instance, among Samoyeds and American Indians. It is often possible that this story may be tradition of the first primeval stock of men. But it is time for me to leave the summer cirrus and turn to the tempest-born rain cloud. It is represented in ancient Indian mythology by the Ritraya or Rakshas. At first, the form of these demons was uncertain and obscure. Vritra is often used as an appellative for a cloud, and Kabhanda, an old name for rain cloud, in later times became the name of a devil. Of Vritra, who envelopes the mountains with vapor, it is said, the darkness stood retaining the water. The mountains lay in the belly of Vritra. By degrees, Vritra stood out more prominently as a demon, and he is described as a devourer of gigantic proportions. In the same way, Rakshasas obtain corporeal form and individuality. He is a misshapen giant, like to a cloud, with a red beard and red hair, with pointed protruding teeth, ready to lacerate and devour human flesh. His body is covered with coarse bristling hair. His huge mouth is open. He looks from side to side as he walks, lusting after the flesh and blood of men, to satisfy his raging hunger, and to quench his consuming thirst. Remember, don't turn me into the internet police, you guys. Okay, please don't turn me in. This is just coming out of the book. Towards nightfall, his strength increases manifold. He can change his shape at will. He haunts the woods and roams howling through the jungle. In short, he is to the Hindu what the werewolf is to the European. Let me pop over here real quick. Okay. A certain wood was haunted by a Rakshasa. He one day came across a Brahmin, and with a bound reached his shoulders and clung to them, exclaiming, "Hey, go on with you." And the Brahmin, quaking with fear, advanced with him. But when he observed that the feet of the Rakshasa were just as delicate as the stamens of lotus, he asked him, "How is it you have such weak and slender feet?" The Rakshasa replied, "I never walked nor touched the earth with my feet. I have made a vow not to do so." Presently they came to a large pond. Then the Rakshasa bade the Brahmin wait at the edge of the wells. He bathed and prayed to the gods. But the Brahmin thought, as soon as these prayers and ablutions are over, he will tear me to pieces with his fangs to eat me. He has vowed not to walk. I will be off post haste. So he ran away, and the Rakshasa dared not follow him for fear of breaking his vow. There is a similar story in another book, and in Katha Sagara. I have said sufficient to show that natural phenomena gave rise to mythological stories, and that these stories have gradually deteriorated and have been degraded into vulgar superstitions. And I have shown that both the doctrine of metempsychosis and the mythological explanations of meteorological changes have given rise to abundant fable, and among others, to the popular and widespread superstition of lycanthropy. I shall now pass from myth to history, and shall give instances of bloodthirstiness, cruelty, and cannibalism. Chapter XI. The investigation of charges. Let me have a quick drink. Double tap that screen if you like what you're hearing. We're here to educate today. I see I've got some people in the chat room. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lots of people on TikTok coming up. Welcome. Don't forget to hit that follow button. Okay, again, we're going to get into some gory stuff. I'm going to try and clean it up. Again, don't get the internet police on me. I'm doing my best to clean it up. I'll do my best so that it's not so gory and I offend anybody on TikTok or wherever else I'm broadcasting right now. Okay, the history of the man whose name heads this chapter. I purpose giving in details, as the circumstances I shall narrate have, I believe, never before been given with accuracy to the English public. My allergies are bad. The name of Giles de Laval may be well known, as sketches of his bloody career have appeared in many biographies. But these sketches have been very incomplete, as the material from which they were composed of was meager. M. Michelet alone ventured to give the public an idea of the crimes which brought a Marshal of France to the gallows, and his revelations were such that, in the words of M. Henry, Martin, this iron age, which seemed unable to feed surprise at any amount of evil, was struck with dismay. M. Michelet derived his information from the abstract of the papers relating to the case, made by order of Anne of Brittany, in the Imperial Library. The original documents were in the library at Nantes, and a great portion of them were destroyed in the Revolution of 1789. But a careful analysis had been made of them, and this valuable abridgment, which is inaccessible to M. Michelet, came into the hands of M. Lacroix, the eminent French antiquarian, who published a memoir of the Marshal from the information he had thus obtained. It is his work by far the most complete and circumstantial which has appeared, that I condense into the following chapters. Okay, guys, bear with me. Again, please bear with me. Double tap that screen. Show me some love. Show me some love over at Facebook and then YouTube and all those good places. Show me some love. Okay, I'm going to try and clean this up as I go, so bear with me. Please do not turn me into internet police. The most monstrously depraved imagination, says M. Henri Martin, never could have conceived what the trial reveals. M. Lacroix has been obliged to draw a veil over much that transpired, and I must draw it closer still. I have, however, said enough to show that this memorable trial presents horrors probably unsurpassed in the whole volume of the world's history. During the year of 1440, remember 1440, you guys, a terrible rumor spread through Brittany and especially through the ancient Pas de Ritz, which extends along the south of the Loire from Nantes to Paymeuf, to the effect that one of the most famous and powerful noblemen in Brittany, Giles de Laval, Maréchal de Ritz, was guilty of crimes of the most diabolical nature. Laval, eldest son of Guy de Val, second of his name, Sire de Ritz, had raised the junior branch of the illustrious house of Laval above the elder branch, which related to the reigning family of Brittany. He lost his father when he was aged 20, and remained master of a vast territorial inheritance, which increased by his marriage with Catherine de Thouars in 1420. He employed a portion of their fortune in the cause of Charles VII, and in strengthening the French crown. During 7 consecutive years, from 1426 to 1433, he was engaged in military enterprises against the English. His name is always cited, along with those of Dunois, I cannot say that last name, we're not going to go there, Floret d'Eaux, Gaucourt, Richemont, and the most faithful servants of the king. His services were speedily acknowledged by the king, creating him Marshal of France. In 1427, he assaulted the castle of Lude and carried it by storm. He killed with his own hand the commander of the place. Next year, he captured from the English the fortress of Brentford and the castle of Melbourne in 1429. He took an active part in the expedition of Joan of Arc for the deliverance of Orleans and the occupation of Jargeau. And he was with her in the moat when she was wounded by an arrow under the walls of Paris. The marshal, councillor, and chamberlain of the king participated in the direction of public affairs and soon obtained the entire confidence of his master. He accompanied Charles to Reims on the occasion of his coronation and had the honor of bearing the oriflamme. brought, brought for the occasion from the Abbey of St. Remy. His, his intrepidity on the field of battle was as remarkable as his sanctity in council. He proved himself to be both an excellent warrior and a shrewd politician. Suddenly, to the surprise of everyone, he quit the service of Charles of the King and sheathed forever his sword in the retirement of the country. The death of his maternal grandmother, Jeanne de Craon, in 1432 made him so enormously wealthy that his revenues were estimated at 800,000 livres. Nevertheless, in 2 years, by his excessive prodigality, he managed to lose a considerable portion of his inheritance. Malune, Saint-Etienne de la Mormont, Leroux Pornic, and Chanteau he sold to John V, Duke of Brittany, his kinsman, in other lands, and rights he ceded to the Bishop of Nantes and to the chapter of the cathedral in that city. The rumor soon spread that these extensive cessions of territory were sops thrown to the Duke and to the Bishop to restrain the one from confiscating his goods and the other from pronouncing excommunication for the crimes of which people were whispering accused him. But these rumors were probably without foundation, for eventually it was found hard to persuade the Duke of the guilt of his kinsman, and the Bishop was the most determined investigator of the trial. The marshal seldom visited the ducal court, but he often appeared in the city of Nantes, where he inhabited the Hotel de la Suze, with a princely retinue. He had always accompanying him a guard of 200 men and arms, and numerous suite of pages, esquires, chaplains, singers, astrologers, etc., all of whom he paid handsomely. Whenever he left the town or moved to one of his other seats, the cries of the poor, which had been restrained during the time of his presence, broke forth. Tears flowed, curses were uttered, a long-continued wail rose to heaven. The moment that the last of the marshal's party had left the neighborhood, mothers had lost their children, babes had been snatched from the cradle, infants had been spirited away, almost from the maternal arms, and it was known by sad experience that the vanished little ones would never be seen again. But on no part of the country did the shadow of this great fear fall so deeply as on the villages in the neighborhood of the castle of Macao, a gloomy chateau composed of huge towers and surrounded by deep moats, a residence much frequented by De Retz, notwithstanding its somber and repulsive appearance. This fortress was always in a condition to resist a siege. The drawbridge was raised, the portcullis down, the gates closed, the men under arms, the culverins on the bastion always loaded. No one, except the servants, had penetrated into this mysterious asylum and had come forth alive. In the surrounding country, strange tales of horror and devilry circulated in whispers, and yet it was observed that the chapel of the castle was gorgeously decked with tapestries of silk and cloth of gold, that the sacred vessels were encrusted with gems, and that the vestments of the priests were of the most sumptuous character. The excessive devotion of the marshal was also noticed. He was said to hear mass thrice daily, and to be passionately fond of church music. He was said to have asked permission of the Pope that a crucifer should precede him in processions. But when dusk settled down over the forest, and one by one the windows of the castle became illuminated, peasants would point to one casement high up in an isolated tower, from which a clear light streamed through the gloom of night. They spoke of a fierce red glare which irradiated the chamber at times, and of sharp cries ringing out of it through the hushed woods, to be answered only by the howl of the wolf as it rose from its lair to begin its nocturnal rambles. On certain days, at fixed hours, the drawbridge sank, and the servants of De Retz stood at the gateway, distributing clothes, money, and food to the mendicants who crowded round them, soliciting alms. It often happened that children were among the beggars, as often as one of the servants would promise them with some dainty, if they would go to the kitchen for it. Those children who accepted the offer were never seen again. Double tap that screen if you like what you hear, you guys. Double tap that screen. In 1440, the long pent-up exasperation of the people broke all bounds, and with one voice they charged the marshal with the murder of the children, whom they said he had sacrificed to the devil. This charge came to the ears of the Duke of Brittany, but he pooh-poohed it, and would have taken no steps to investigate the truth had not one of his nobles insisted on his doing so. At the same time, Jean de Chatouillon, Bishop of Nantes, and the noble and sage Pierre de Hospital wrote to the Duke expressing very decidedly their views that the charge demanded thorough investigation. John V., reluctant to move against a relation, a man who had served his country so well and was in such a high position, at last yielded to the request, and authorized them to seize the persons of the Sire de Retz and his accomplices. Jean Lebel was charged with this difficult commission. He picked a band of resolute followers, 20 in all, and in the middle of September they presented themselves at the gate of the castle, and summoned the Sire de Retz to surrender. As soon as Giles heard that a troop in the livery of Brittany was at the gate, he inquired who was their leader. On receiving the answer, l'Abbé, he started, turned pale, crossed himself, and prepared to surrender, observing that it was impossible to resist fate. Years before, one of his astrologers had assured him that he would one day pass into the hands of an abbé, and till this moment, de Retz had supposed that the prophecy signified that he should eventually become a monk. Giles de Sille, Roger de Briqueville, and others of the accomplices of the marshal took to flight, but Henriette and Pontou remained with him. The drawbridge was lowered, and the marshal offered his sword to Jean Lebert. The gallant sergeant approached, knelt to the marshal, and unrolled before him parchment, sealed with the seal of Brittany. "Tell me the tenor of this parchment," said Giles de Retz with dignity. "Our good sire of Brittany enjoins you, my lord, by these presents, to follow me to the good town of Nantes, where to clear yourself of certain criminal charges brought against you." "I will follow immediately, my friend, glad to obey the will of my lord of Brittany, but, that it may not be said that the Seigneur de Retz has received a message without largesse, I order my treasurer, Henriette, to hand over to you and your followers 20 gold crowns." "Grand mercy, Monseigneur. I pray God that he may give you good and long life." "Pray God only to have mercy upon me and to pardon my sins." The marshal had his horses saddled, and left Martial with Pontou and Henriette, who had thrown in their lot with him. It was with lively emotion that the people in the villages, traversed by the little troop, saw the redoubted Giles de Laval ride through their streets, surrounded by soldiers in the livery of the Duke of Brittany, and accompanied by a single soldier of his own. The roads and streets were thronged with peasants. The roads and streets were thronged. Peasants left the fields, women their kitchens, laborers deserted their cattle at the plow, to throng the road of Nantes. The cavalcade proceeded in silence. The very crowd which had gathered to see it was hushed. Presently a shrill woman's voice was raised. "My child! Restore my child!" Then a wild, wrathful howl broke from the lips of the throng, rang along the Nantes road, and only died away as the great gates of the Chateau de Beaufort closed on the prisoner. The whole population of Nantes was in a commotion, and it was said that the investigation would be fictitious, that the Duke would screen his kinsman, and that the object of general expurgation... Hang on, I'm going to move to the puzzle piece. Give me a second. Okay. And that the object of general expurgation would escape with the surrender of some of his lands. And such would probably have been the event of the trial, had not the Bishop of Nantes and the Grand Non-Essential taken a very decided course in the matter. They gave the Duke no peace till he had yielded to their demand for a thorough investigation and a public trial. John V. nominated Jean de Toucheronde to collect information and to take down the charges brought against the marshal. At the same time, he was given to understand that the matter was not to be pressed, and that the charges upon which the marshal was to be tried were to be softened down as much as possible. The commissioner, Jean de Chauterand, opened the investigation on the 18th September, assisted only by his clerk, Jean Thomas. The witnesses were introduced either singly or in groups, if they were relations. On entering, the witnesses knelt before the commissioner, kissed the crucifix, and swore with his hand on the Gospels that he would speak the truth, and nothing but the truth. After this he related all the facts referring to the charge, which came under his cognizance, without being interrupted or interrogated. The first to present herself was Perrine Lessard, living at La Roche-Bernard. She related with tears in her eyes that 2 years ago, in the month of September, the Sire de Retz had passed with all his retinue through La Roche-Bernard on his way from Venice, and had lodged with Jean Collin. She lived opposite the house in which the nobleman was staying. Her child, the finest in the village, a lad aged 10, had attracted the notice of Pontou, and perhaps of the marshal himself, who stood at a window, leaning on his squire's shoulder. Pontou spoke to the child and asked him whether he would like to be a chorister. The boy replied that his ambition was to be a soldier. "Well, then," said the squire, "I'll equip you." The lad then laid hold of Pontou's dagger, and expressed his desire to have such a weapon in his belt. Thereupon the mother had run up, and had made him leave hold of the dagger, saying that the boy was doing very well at school, and was getting on with his letters, for he was one day to be a monk. Pontou had dissuaded her from this project, and had proposed to take the child with him to Mexico, and to educate him to be a soldier. Thereupon he had paid her clown 100 souls to buy the lad a dress, and had obtained permission to carry him off. Next day her son had been mounted on a horse, purchased for him from Jean Collin, and had left the village in the retinue of the Sire de Retz. The poor mother, at parting, had gone in tears to the marshal, and had entreated him to be kind to her child. From that time she had been able to obtain no information regarding her son. She had watched the Sire de Retz whenever he had passed through La Roche-Bernard, but had never observed her child among his pages. She had questioned several of the marshal's people, but they had laughed at her. The only answer she had obtained was, "Be not afraid, he is either at Bachugel, or else at Tifagus, or Pornic, or somewhere." Perrine's story was corroborated by Jean Collin, his wife, and his mother-in-law. Jean Limgren and his wife, Eileen Dulix, Perrault de Ponist, Qualamy Guillian, Qualamy Poirier, Etienne Maclades, and Jean Lefebvre, all inhabitants of Saint Etienne de Montluc. I dare you to try this. Deposed that a little child, son of Guillaume Bryce, of the said parish, having lost his father at the age of 9, lived on alms, and went round the country begging. This child, named Jamet, had vanished suddenly at midsummer, and nothing was known of what had become of him. But strong suspicions were entertained of his having been carried off by an aged hag who had appeared shortly before in the neighborhood, and who had vanished along with the child. On the 27th of September, Jean de Structurel, assisted by Nicolas Chateau, notary of the court at Nantes, received the depositions of several inhabitants of Pointe de Launay, near Bouvron, to wit, Guillaume Forish and wife Jean Lefleur, and Richard, I'm trying, guys, okay? Wife of Jean Gandieu. Jean, it's not Jean, it's Jean. I remember this. These depositions, though very vague, afforded sufficient cause for suspicion to rest on the marshal. 2 years before, a child of 12, son of Jean Bernard, and another child of the same age, son of Menegue, had gone to Michel. The son of Menegue had returned alone in the evening, relating that his companion had asked him to wait for him on the road whilst he begged at the gates of the Sire de Retz. The son of Menenge said that he had waited 3 hours, but his companion hadn't returned. The wife of Fourage disposed that she had seen the lad at this time with an old hag who was leading him by the hand towards Macheco. That same evening, this hag passed over the bridge of Launay, and the wife of Fourage asked her what had become of little Bernard. The old woman neither stopped nor answered, further than by saying he was well provided for. The boy had not been seen since. On the 28th September, the Duke of Brittany joined another commissioner, Jean, we'll leave it at that, and a second notary, Michel Estelure, to touch Ronde et Chateau. The inhabitants of Mixerel, a little town over which the Sire de Brits exercised supreme power, appeared now to dispose against their lord. André Barbier, shoemaker, declared that the last Easter a child, son of his neighbor George's, had disappeared. He was last seen gathering plums behind the hotel Rondeau. This disappearance surprised none in Machecoul, and no one ventured to comment on it. Andre and his wife were in daily terror of losing their own child. They had been a pilgrimage to Saint Jean de Angely, and had been asked there to whether it was the custom at Machecoul to eat children. On their return, they had heard of 2 children having vanished: the son of Jean Gendron, and that of Alexander Chantelier. Andrea Barbier had made some inquiries about the circumstances of their disappearance, and had been advised to hold his tongue and to shut his ears and eyes, unless he were prepared to be thrown into a dungeon by the Lord of Machecoul. But, bless me, he had said, am I to believe that a fairy spirits off and eats our little ones? Believe what you like, was the advice given to him, but ask no questions. As this conversation had taken place, one of the marshal's men at arms had passed, when all those who had been speaking took to their heels. Andre, who had run with the rest without knowing exactly why he fled, came upon a man near the church of the Holy Trinity, who was weeping bitterly and crying out, "Oh, my God, wilt thou not restore to me my little one? This man has also been robbed of his child." Lucetti, wife of Sergeant, living at Bonadier in the parish of St. Croix de Machecoul, had lost her son 2 years before and had not seen him since. She besought the commissioners with tears in her eyes to restore him to her. "I left him," she said, "at home whilst I went to the field with my husband to sow flax. He was a bonny little lad, and he was as good as he was bonny. He had to look after his tiny sister, who was a year and a half old. On my return home, the little girl was found, but she could not tell me what had become of him. Afterwards, we found in the marsh a small red woolen cap which had belonged to my poor darling. But it was in vain that we dragged the marsh. Nothing was found more, except good evidence that he had not been drowned. A hawker who sold needles and thread passed through at the time, and told me that an old woman in gray, with a black hood on her head, had bought of him some children's toys, and had a few moments after passed him, leading a little boy by the hand. Georges Le Barbier, living near the gate of the chateau, gave an account of the manner in which his son had left. The boy was apprenticed by Jean Pelletier, tailor to Mime de Ritz, and to the household of the castle. He seemed to be getting on. Thank you. Double tap that screen if you like what you're hearing. Where am I? He seemed to be getting on in his profession, when last year, about St. Barnabas Day, he went in to play at ball on the castle green. He never returned. This youth and his master, Jean Pelletier, had been in the habit of eating and drinking at the castle, and Bad always laughed at the ominous stories told by the people. Hilary and his wife confirmed the statements of Le Barbier. They also said that they knew of the loss of the sons of Jean Grindon, Jean Rouen, and Alexander Chatelier. the son of Jean Rendon, aged 12, lived with the said Hilary and learned of him the trade of skinner. He had been working in the shop for 7 or 8 years, and was a steady, hard-working lad. One day, Messieurs Giles de Sille and Roger de Berqueville entered the shop to purchase a pair of hunting gloves. They asked if little Gendron might take a message for them to the castle. Hilaire readily consented, and the boy received beforehand the payment for going, a gold angelus, and he started, promising to be back directly, but he never returned. That evening, Hilary and his wife, observing Giles de Sille and Roger de Berqueville returning to the castle, ran and asked what had become of the apprentice. They replied that they had no notion of where he was, as they had been absent during hunting, but it was possible he might have been sent to Tiffauges, another castle of de Retz. Hilary, whose depositions were more grave and explicit than the others, positively asserted that Jean de Jardin, valet to Roger de Berqueville, had told him he knew of a cask secreted in the castle, full of children's corpses. He said that he had often heard people say that the children were enticed to the chateau and then unalived, but had treated it as an idle tale. He said, moreover, that the marshal was not accused of having any hand in the murders, but that his servants were supposed to be guilty. Jean Gendron himself deposed to the loss of his son, and he added that his was not the only child which had vanished mysteriously. He knew of 30 that had disappeared. Jean Chipholin, elder and junior, John Omlin, and Clement Dore, all inhabitants of the parish, disposed that they had known a poor man of the same parish named Mathelin Thomas, who had lost his son aged 12, and that he had died of grief in consequence. Jean Drouin of Vachegaud, who for 9 years had been in a state of uncertainty whether her son was alive or dead, deposed that the child had been carried off whilst keeping sheep. She had thought that he had been devoured of wolves, but 2 women of Vachegaud, now deceased, had seen Giles de Sille approach the little shepherd, speak to him, and point to the castle. Shortly after, the lad had walked off in that direction. The husband of Jean Rouen went to the chateau to inquire about his son, but could obtain no information. When next Giles de Sille appeared in the town, the disconsolate mother entreated him to restore her child to her. Giles reported that he knew nothing about him, and he had been to the king at Amboise. Jean, widow of the Amory Headland, living at Machico, had also lost 8 years before a little child, as he had pursued some butterflies in the wood. At the same time, 4 other children had been carried off, those of Gendron Round, Mace Sorin. She said that the story circulated throughout the country was that Giles de Sille stole children to make them over the English, in order to obtain the ransom of his brother who was captive. But she added that this report was traced to the servants of Sille, and that it was propagated by them. One of the last children to disappear was that of Noel Ice, living in the parish of St. Croix. Double tap that screen. A man from Tiffauges had said to her that for 1 child stolen at Bachico, there were 7 carried away by Tiffauges. May Sorin confirmed the deposition of the widow of Headland, and repeated that the circumstances connected with the loss of the children of Château-Rouen, Gendron, and Labardier. Perrine Ranjou had entered the castle with the company of Jean Levert. She had entered a stable and had found a heap of ashes and powder, which had a sickly and peculiar smell. At the bottom of the trough she had found a child's shirt covered with blood. Several inhabitants of the burg of Fresnay, Perrault, Jean Serrier, Catherine de Grippy, Giles Garnier, Perrin Villard, Marguerite Ritter, Marie Carfin, Jean Ladice, and said that they had heard Guillaume Hamelin last Easter lamenting the loss of 2 children. Isabel, wife of Hamelin, confirmed these depositions, saying that she had lost them 7 years before. She at that time had 4 children, the eldest aged 15, the youngest aged 7, went together to Moscow to buy some bread, but they didn't return. She sat up for them all night, and next morning she heard that another child had been lost, the son of Michoud Bonnel of Cecilia Ritz. Guillemette, wife of Michaud Bonnel, said that her son had been carried off whilst guarding cows. Guillemette Rodrigo and his wife living at Baring-Gould deposed that on the eve of the last St. Bartholomew's Day, the Sire de Ritz lodged with Guillaume Plumet in his village. Pontou, who accompanied the marshal, saw a lad of 15 named Bernard Lecanio, servant to Rodrigo, standing at the door of the house. The lad could not speak much French, but only Basse Breton. Pontou beckoned to him and spoke to him in a low tone. That evening at 10 o'clock, Bernard left his master's house, Rodrigo and his wife being absent. The servant maid, who had saw him go out, called to him that the supper table was not yet cleared, but he paid no attention to what she said. Rodrigo, annoyed at the loss of his servant, asked some of the marshal's men what had become of him. They replied mockingly that they knew nothing of the little Breton, but that he had probably been sent to Tiffauges to be trained as page to the lord. Marguerite Serrain, the chambermaid, alluded to the above, confirmed the statement of Rodrigo, adding that Pontou had entered the house and spoken with Bernard. Guillaume Plumet and wife confirmed that Rodrigo and Serrain had said what they had said. Thomas I see and wife deposed to the loss of their son, aged 10, who had gone to beg at the gate of the castle, and a little girl had seen him drawn by an offer of meat in the chateau. Jaime, wife of Estoucherout Saint Leger, had seen 2 sons, one aged 10, the other 7, to the castle. Let me check my power over here, you guys. Just give me a second. If this shuts down over on TikTok, the reason being is that my battery in my phone, I need a new battery. So, and it's not charging right. So hopefully I won't lose everybody. So here we go. Okay. Jeanne, wife of Estoucherout of Saint Leger, had seen 2 sons, one aged 10, the other 7, to the castle to obtain alms. They had not been seen since. On the 2nd October, the commissioners sat again, and the charges became graver, and the servants of the marshal became more and more implicated. The disappearance of 13 other children was substantiated under circumstances throwing strong suspicion on the inmates of the castle. I will not give the details, for they much resemble those of the former dispositions. Suffice to say that before the commissioners closed the inquiry, a herald of the Duke of Brittany in Tabard blew 3 calls on the trumpet from the steps of the Tower of Beaufort, summoning all who had additional charges to bring against the Sire de Ritz, to present themselves without delay. As no fresh witnesses arrived, the case was considered to be made out, and the commissioners visited the Duke with the information they had collected in their hands. The Duke hesitated long as to the steps he should take. Should he judge and sentence the kinsman, the most powerful of his vassals, the bravest of his captains, a counselor of the king, a marshal of France? Will still unsettled in his mind as to the course he should pursue, he received a letter from Giles de Ritz, which produced quite a different effect from that which had been intended to produce. He writes, "It is true that I am perhaps the most detestable of all sinners, having sinned horribly again and again, yet I have never failed in my religious duties. I have heard many masses, vespers, and others, have fasted in Lent and on vigils, have confessed my sins, deploring them heartily, and have received the blood of our Lord at least once in a year. Since I have been languishing in prison, awaiting your honored justice, I have been overwhelmed with incomparable repentance for my crimes, which I am ready to acknowledge and to expiate as is suitable. Wherefore, I supplicate you, M., my cousin, to give me license to retire into a monastery, and there to lead a good and exemplary life. I care not into what monastery I am sent, but I intend that all my goods, etc., should be distributed among the poor, who are the members of Jesus Christ on earth. Awaiting your glorious clemency, on which I rely, I pray God our Lord to protect you and your kingdom, he who addresses you in all earthly humanity. The Duke read this letter to Pierre de Hospital, president of Brittany, and to the Bishop of Nantes, who were those most resolute in the pressing of the trial. They were horrified at the tone of this dreadful communication, and assured the Duke that the case was so clear, and the steps taken had been so decided, that it was impossible for him to allow De Retz to escape trial by such an impious device as he suggested. In the meantime, the bishop and the Grand Seneschal had set on foot an investigation at the castle of Machical, and had found numerous traces of human remains. But a complete examination could not be made, as the Duke was anxious to screen his kinsman as much as possible, and refused to authorize one. The Duke now summoned his principal officers and held a council with them. They unanimously sided with the bishop and with the bishop and the hospital. And when John still hesitated, the Bishop of Nantes rose and said, Monsignor, this case is one for the church as much as for your court to take up. Consequently, if your president of Brittany does not bring the case in secular court, by the judge of the heaven and earth, I will cite the author of these execrable crimes and to appear before our tribunal. Double tap that screen if you like what you hear, you guys. The resolution of the bishop compelled the Duke to yield, and it was decided that the trial should take its course without let or hindrance. In the meantime, the unhappy wife of Giles de Retz, who had been separated from him for some while, and who had loathed his crimes, though she still felt for him as her husband, hurried to the Duke with her daughter to entreat pardon for the wretched man. But the Duke refused to hear her. Thereupon she went to Amboise to intercede with the king for him who bad once been his close friend. It says bad, but this is for him who had once been his close friend and advisor. All right, that's it for today. We'll continue next Sunday with the trial. Let me close this off here. Like I said, these have been transcribed from old scripts and stuff, and so there is misspelling. That's why they had bad instead of had and all that stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed today. It went a little longer than usual, but I love reading this. I love doing this, and like I said, these are stories of werewolves and different background of psychiatrist stuff and things like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm here every Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific, reading from a book. When this book's finished, we'll move on to another paranormal themed book, just et cetera, et cetera. But I want to thank you all. TikTok, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. You can check out the show tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow, let's tease over tomorrow. Tomorrow, my guest will be Chester Moore. We're going to be talking about Bigfoot. But Chester has some interesting theories. He studied Bigfoot for years. And he's got some interesting theories that maybe what people are seeing, and depending on the location, of course, is they're seeing feral primates. Primates that may have been in labs, things like that either escaped or were released out into the wild. So he's got some really cool theories on that. So we're going to be talking about Bigfoot and the chance that people were seeing something other than the creature itself. That'll be, and make note of this too, that'll be at 5:30 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. We're going to go an hour early with the show, okay? So be prepared for that. And you guys over here can join us, youtube.com/@California Haunts Radio. Every day, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. We have a show tomorrow. It just happens to be 5:30. Okay? All right, guys. Well, it's been a great day, and I'm going to go ahead and sign off of TikTok here. Thanks for coming, TikTok. Hope to see you next time. Let me get in here and find the button. There we go. See you, TikTok. Okay, guys. Back over here now. Let me turn my phone off real quick. Ooh, it held pretty good. Okay. The battery held pretty good. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming. Starting a new week, and here we go. And I hope you guys, well, not enjoyed this, but were as interested as I was in this book. Very interesting book. And this guy, this priest, this Anglican priest that wrote this thing, was so intelligent. I mean, a lot of the stuff he talks about is happening like in the, stuff we can compare with now. So I always find this book fascinating. All right, that being said, I will see you guys tomorrow. Remember, it's a 5:30 p.m. Pacific show. So remember, and it's going to be Chester Moore that's going to be on. But I appreciate you all for coming tonight and spending your Sunday evening with me. And hopefully we'll get to do this more often. And as we keep going, we keep plugging along. So thank you everybody. Thank you everybody who's going to be listening to this around the world on the RSS feed. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here. Just try to get the word out of our little show. If you haven't done so already on Facebook and you like what you heard, hit that follow button. If you're over on TikTok, hit that follow button. Subscribe if you want. Give me a subscribe. YouTube, subscribe. Help me out with some subscriptions. I really appreciate it. And we'll get back to doing paranormal question of the day starting tomorrow as well. Get everything flowing. I'm also going to be doing some debunking videos via TikTok that I'll share with you guys. Looking at different videos that people shoot and trying to figure out whether it's fact or fake, right? Okay. All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your evening.